I just feel I feel so bad for Bakugo at this point because we all know why he's here, and it's because you're just not good enough for the big bads. Before we have this review of chapter 341 of My Hero Academia, please do me a favor, leave your own thoughts on the chapter in the comment section down below. Leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, make sure the little notification bell so you don't miss out on any videos that come to the channel. Also, I do have a Patreon down below. I appreciate any support you could give me. Now, let's get into it. What's up, guys? I got Pencil here, and here we are to review chapter 341 of My Hero Academia, which is known as The Story of How We Became Heroes -1. And honestly, I'm gonna like that. I really do like that. I'll admit, as much as I didn't like the convention at first, if you're gonna do it this way, Horikoshi, I like the twist on that. That's really, really good. Does it save the entire trope? Depending on how far you go with this. Like, if we really get no chapter names other than this, like +1, -1, so on and so forth, then I'm not gonna like it too much because I just feel like it ran out of chapter names. But at the same time, this was a good twist on it. I really wasn't expecting that. Really, really good. I like it, Horikoshi. Keep up the good work. For the chapter overall, though, I don't know, Horikoshi. You can't make me sympathize with these people. They're just all monsters. But let's hop right into it. So you open up and we get to see a little something. It's a rundown home, and it's a certain someone in this rundown home that we see with certain kanji and words scratched over the walls, like demon, perish, like, all them kind of words. And we see that apparently some people they did their best, they tried their best, but this child, she's just not normal. She's just strange. She's a beast, if you will. And you turn the page and you get to see it's Toga. And as a member of the not fan of Toga Himiko Club, I will readily admit I kind of don't blame the parent. This is the thing, right? Because I get what this is supposed to do. This is supposed to, like, humanize us with Toga and the whole entire reason she's fighting. Like, the idea that she wasn't normal and society didn't like the way she was, and thusly she had to change and or conform. But her rebellion, her going against this, is what makes her unique. It's what makes her a hero, even if it's in the -1 sense. And we see that she's essentially just exploring the remnants of her own home. And she's seeing that everything's destroyed. There are gashes in the wall. Everything's broken down and torn apart. There's just shadows being casted everywhere. And as Toga's going through this, she's reliving a lot of what she was told in the past. No one's ever going to accept that creepy side of yours. No one will ever like you. Your face is too scary. Stuff like that. And here's the thing. I do believe, to some degree, that child Toga definitely could have used some better reinforcement, a better environment to grow up in. Obviously, the My Hero Academia world was very against anyone with a mutant type quirk, and considering Toga was literally built like a vampire from round start, it makes sense that she wouldn't be well accepted. It's a scary piece of imagery to see a human with slit eyes and vampiric teeth. I feel like even if you were to pop all the Toga stands in front of someone like Toga and you saw someone open their mouth and they had that and they also had the slit eyes, you probably wouldn't be too comfortable with that. So I do feel bad for child Toga in the sense that she was left out for something that was beyond her control. She didn't choose to be born this way. She didn't choose to have this quirk. She didn't choose to have these tendencies, so on and so forth. So I do feel bad for Toga in that sense. I do believe Horikoshi succeeds in pushing the message that this world isn't fair. Not all men are born equal or created equal. I forget which one the quote is at the beginning of the manga, but that is very, very true. The fact that Toga was born this way did lead to her suffering, and it led her down the path she is today, or the path that she's on today. And I think Horikoshi does a great job of establishing how deeply rooted this is, because notably, none of the images or words that Toga is going through right now have, like, they're not written anywhere. There's nothing blatant on these walls. Toga's just reliving it because just walking through her old home, as dilapidated as it was, as destroyed as it is, it just brings back these memories. This is so harshly ingrained into her character. And admittedly, it's a part of her character, or at least the trauma side of her character. It's something that isn't necessarily focused on all too much. She's much more, or at least the past trauma. It's brought up every now and then, but notably, I believe, to be fair, we saw pieces. We saw a early beginning and modern stuff of Dabi's backstory. We saw pretty much all of Shigaraki's story, considering My Hero Academia is essentially his story alongside Midoriya's. And we saw a lot of Twice's story, at least the parts of the story that mattered. So it's interesting to get glimpses back at this part of Toga that isn't necessarily always acknowledged. It's something that drives her to this day. It's her main motivation and probably the reason why she is the way she is. But At the same time, it's mostly glazed over because at worst comes to worst, hate to say it, Toga still is a side character. Or it's interesting because she's a reflection of our main female character, but does that make her a main character as reflection? Like, I'd say Shigaraki's a main character, but I wouldn't say Dabi's a main character either. He's a side character's side villain, because would Todoroki count as a main But regardless, notably, there just isn't that much time. My Hero Academia runs on a very limited time schedule, especially with Horikoshi's usually lightning fast pace, so you aren't going to get much of this backstory. So I'm glad that Horikoshi, even if not showing us directly, gives us this little hint, these little teasings of what was there and what led to the person we see today. It's really, really good stuff. And while it's not exactly non-verbal storytelling or a lot of show don't tell, it's a tell but put in an interesting way through the dilapidation that reveals parts of a lighter past that leads to the dark present that we have today. Good stuff on Horikoshi's part. I really appreciate that. And of course, we get to see when Toga finally arrives at her room, we get a real glimpse into the past, this fading. We see Toga back in her childhood state, and she apparently dreamed that she was a bird, or she wanted to be a little bird, and she had this whole idea and dream of a bird digging into her. And before y'all take that in any weird way, no, it was actually just a red sparrow that would dance on top of her, and then it would peck away at her belly button and eat its way inside her, and it'd be dancing inside her. Essentially another creature invading its way into Toga and tearing her apart and becoming a part of her, consuming her and thusly becoming a part of her. And I think that leads great into the idea of Toga's modern quirk and ideology, essentially, of consuming another person to become one with them, to better understand them. And apparently Toga appreciated the feeling so much as a child that it lasted with her to this day, even in this weird mutated state. And notably, we see how far Toga is detached from the negative part of her trauma and how much it has affected her to the more lasting, in her viewpoint, shifting into Toga's shoes, her viewpoint, the positive parts, because all she notes is that they threw her stuff away. And while her smile does drop, it's not a frown. It just levels out. And I think that's very pertinent to show, because while it does us a good service while removing any disservice, because it shows us that Toga is still affected by her past. It still does drive her to this day. However, it's not going to drag her back from what she has to do. And of course, while that can be inferred through this smile into faded half smile, Dabi, being our very literal, open, direct character, is the one who puts it out and lays it out on the table. He's the one that's like, yo, who would have thought even a psychopath like you had feelings after all? And admittedly, as much as I don't agree with Toya, and I do believe that we're definitely going to need a little bit more from him before I believe I can feel bad for him, in the same way that I feel like I can't feel bad for Toga too much after the whole the unaliving thing with a whole bunch of people. I can't feel bad for Dabi at this point, but I'll admit I like what Horikoshi is doing with his character. Like, now that he's essentially having to remove all subtlety from the character, now that the twist is out there and there's not necessarily much more to be revealed other than like how he survived the burning forest, he's allowing Dabi to essentially be this theater character. And I forget, so I was talking with someone and they described Dabi perfectly in my mind as a theater kid cast to play the villain. Like, freshman, just got into high school, got cast in the villain role, and is just living it up, loving life. And it seems like that. The way he's posted up on the windowsill, even though that's definitely super uncomfortable, he's still dressed in leather. And I know his scars are chafing. Like, he's having a blast doing what he has to do. And of course, when Toga tries to argue that, hey, what do you mean? I'm super normal. I'm not a psychopath. It's not like I kill people or anything. Like, no, that couldn't be me. Not me. Someone else. If you're thinking of someone else, it's not me. And it is her. That's why I still can't rock with that. But, I mess with you Toga stands. Yeah, y'all do what y'all want. I am not here to judge. I'm not here to judge verbally. I'm here to judge internally. But in terms of her arguing her normalcy, Dabi's like, yeah, okay, if you say so. Regardless, do you think you have what it takes? And Toga, like the audience in this case, because I'll admit when I was first reading the chapter, I asked, have what it takes for what? Like, destroying the world? And Dabi said just that, to destroy the pathetic world. And notably, I like what Toga says here, and it's not exactly what you expect. Like, A simple answer would have been yes, or yeah, or whatever, of course, or something like that. Of course. Oh, I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself. But what she says is, can't go back now. And I think that ties perfectly into the whole, like, that wasn't even my mic cutting out, that was me cutting out. I don't know why. Like, I ran out of air and my throat locked up. But what she means when she says can't go back now is that she had the chance to conform to the world. But after all she's done, after all the lives she's taken, after all the steps she's made, after all she's lost and gained through her journey so far, she can't go back. She can't go back to this home that's been dilapidated, destroyed, and torn apart. She just has to move forward. And Dabi, being the physical symbolizer of moving forward, does what any great flame of rebirth does and destroys the home. She is told to have a great laugh, or have a good laugh, by Dabi, as the entire home, if not entire area, goes up in a blazing flame. And we see that Dabi is, of course, doing something a little bit reckless here. He's like burning down an entire area, and considering he has blue flames, it wouldn't be that hard to tell who it was. But he's like, yeah, it doesn't really matter. The heroes are stretched so thin, they never catch us. And let me be clear. You think I'm kind? Well, I suppose my kindness is why I want to make Endeavor suffer so much. But I guess the only way we can do that is by using you. Transform with twice his blood. But I'm actually kind of glazing over things. I'm kind of rushing them through. And I like how this is only something I get when I'm talking about the chapter and rereading. I'm bumping up this chapter a few points because now I'm like better understanding it. I like how Dabi or the state, like what Toga is going through here is a lot of like two-sided things. Like it's a lot of reading into stuff, and who knows, I may be reading into nothing. I tend to do that a lot. I'm not the brightest tool. However, I'm a tool, but I'm not the brightest one. I'm not the sharpest spoon in the kitchen shed, as I commonly say. But the thing is, I like how the "you're too kind" statement can be misconstrued, and what I think Dabi did. Because notably, when Toga sees her house burned down, she doesn't have a look of glee on her face. Like, it's just shock, confusion even. And that doesn't look like a person who's totally confident in what they're doing. However, we see that this "you're too kind" statement is Dabi, essentially Toga interpreting what Dabi did, burning down the house, being that step that Toga couldn't take. Notably, Toga was just going to leave the building alone and let it rock. She could have sliced it apart. She could have done whatever. Bada bing, bada boom. But no, it's Dabi who forces her to take that next step. And that's what makes him so kind. The fact that he allowed, with the chance of heroes coming to find them, he allowed her to take this final step of letting her past go and stepping towards the ever great, expansive, and possibly very dark future ahead of them. And Dabi, who misinterprets this, just says it as, hey, I don't really care, because essentially you're just like Twice was. You're a tool. And I think what I'll appreciate about Dabi, I think after all this is said and done, is how he is at least completely honest about his intentions, because he says that he's still doing all of this just to make Endeavor suffer. And the best way that they can do that is, or the best way Dabi can do that, is by using all the resources he has at hand. And obviously one of the greatest resources he has is Toga, because she can act as a conduit for their lost member in Twice. And we see that Dabi figured out that as long as Toga has the blood of someone she holds dear, she can use that person's quirk. And of course, Dabi, being the ever planner he is, I suppose, managed to get at least a little vial of Twice's blood. And with that, it's like Twice was never gone, because as long as Toga can use his quirk appropriately, she can make 1,000,000 Twices, and those Twices can make 1,000,000 more. And that will lead to the war. And I think that's really, really, it's the best of both worlds. As much as I still don't like Toga's Quirk Awakening, I don't like, I know I'm mean. I'm not the whole fan of, like, the way quirks went, not the biggest fan of them. However, regardless, I do think this is a good way to still keep Twice in the narrative without having Twice in the narrative. Because I'll admit, his death didn't hit me the hardest, because I was like, Well, sucks to suck. He had to go, buddy. I'm glad that his quirk, which was super useful for something like a wartime scenario, does get to stay around. This is a great way to do it if you are going to use tools that are set up in the narrative. Nice work, Horikoshi. It really wasn't. I didn't predict this one. I'll give you that. I didn't predict this one. This is great. And we see that the people who will get the last laugh will be the villains, according to Dabi. And I find it interesting how Dabi says, this is interesting. Let me see. Where does he say? Where does he say? Let me find it. People live so that they can laugh. That's I don't know, for some reason, of all the characters to say that, I wasn't expecting Dabi. I don't know. I never necessarily associate his character with laughter, but I suppose it works. I feel like Dabi would say something like, people live so they could have joy, or something along those lines. So if anything, I associated All For One with laughter because of how much he seems to not care. But hey, that's still a cool comparison. I'm glad that the whole last laugh mindset comes with the idea of this war, and it kind of fits into a whole ton of like ancient comic stuff, like last laugh, Joker, blah blah blah. Horikoshi, really good move on your part. I like it. I really like that. That was a bomber opening to the chapter. When I first read it, I wasn't the biggest fan of it, but now actually going back and analyzing it deeper and taking in the double meanings of the words here, I really like it. This is actually super duper solid. And of course, we cut over to a different part of the world, and we see Spinner. He hears something, and it's Shigaraki, who is kind of recovering for the most part. I mean, I guess it's fine, but it's kind of hilarious that All For One's still just chilling out on this stone throne with the Gorillas reference, type it away on a computer, and Shigaraki, he's just like, or I guess All For Shigaraki, he's just chilling at the back in the dark hole, just screaming and yelling. Spinner goes back and find him just breathing heavy, and notably, we see that All For One, while dragging around his throne, is like, chill out. Tomura, he's coming along. It'll be fine. And he apparently, what All For One says is that he's approaching the quirk singularity, and I wonder what that means. I mean, I know the quirk singularity was that quirks are going to get to a point where they are so strong, so powerful, so potent, and so dangerous that they can't get any stronger. And whoever gets that quirk is going to be the apex of creation, essentially. But, I mean, Shigaraki lost quirks, didn't he? So how is he becoming the quirk singularity? I mean, he had a bunch. He did have a bunch. And once again, that's the issue I have with Star and Stripe Sacrifice. There's too little context. We don't know what he lost. We don't know how many. We don't know what potency. We don't know. So, who knows? I guess it makes sense he's going to be the quirk singularity. And I love how All For One is lying. I love how All For One lies directly to Spinner's face. Because Spinner, he's a character that admittedly, I don't rock with entirely because, child unaliving. He was down for that. But in terms of like sympathetic characters, I still do feel the worst for Spinner because he's simply here because of following Stain, which was a lie because he thought he's following Shigaraki because he was following Stain. But Stain and Shigaraki hated each other. So Spinner was already believing one lie. And now that he was so dedicated to Shigaraki, he's not believing another lie from All For One that Shigaraki will still be himself. Because notably, we know All For One knows that his consciousness is currently either overriding or merging with Shigaraki's right now. So it will not be Shigaraki. And it's a sad state of affairs for twice. Why did I say twice? It's a sad state of a sad state of affairs for Spinner because the Gorillas reference is like, yo, not gonna lie. Did you know that out of all villain activity, people that are mutants are a lot more highly targeted? They're considered the more massive villain population. And it seems like, despite all the efforts that are put towards equality, there's still a disparity in that. And of course, due to this disparity, this inability to find work, live, and even have a decent life, this need to fall to villainhood, it rallies up many people like you. That's the reason you're here, aren't you? Because you couldn't live a normal life. So many of your kind harbor a deep hatred for those who we call heroes. And, of course, we try to pave the way. We try to establish ourselves as something more reputable. Something that we can work with. Something understandable. But the thing is that, admittedly, I'm no mutant. And I don't represent the same thing you can represent. And thus, while you started off as an imitation of a fool and stain, you can now stand for something much more. And I love what Spinner says back. Hey, I'm sorry to say this, but they've got it all wrong. I never really had any high ideals in mind when going into this. I was just following a trend. And I love how he doesn't get a choice in the matter, because not only does the Gorillas reference cut him off, but he's like, yo, even if you did have these alternate ideas of what you want to do, it doesn't matter anymore, because everyone's already united, because you're going to be the one that's going to pull the trigger in Redestro's stead. Because now that Spinner is like this mutant standing force. Like, sure, Toga's technically a mutant with the slit eyes and stuff like that, but Spinner is the more external mutant, and now he can be used as the leading force, the guideline for all other people to follow behind. And of course, they're going to readily rally behind him, because he's a symbol of multiple pillars of villainy that stand against this society, and he's a perfect example of the biggest group marginalized by society. So all of that works, but I love how Spinner doesn't want any of it, because it's never what he was here for. He never wanted to be a leader, he wanted to be a follower. But ironically, in the sense where he's supposedly becoming a leader, he's still just being a follower, because he's just following orders. And like Horikoshi can pick up a pencil sometimes. He can pick up a pencil, he can write. That man he can write sometimes. I ain't even gonna lie to you. This man knows how to dibble and dabble with a pen, and I just love it. This stuff is juicy, it's meaty, and I appreciate it. And I love how Spinner is like just forced into this role, because he's still loyal to Shigaraki at the end of all things, because he literally shuts down, right? Because once All For One says, the step you're about to take will bring hope to everyone, he's forced to be this symbol. He's handed the remote control. He's the one that's going to pull this metaphorical trigger. Instead of challenging it, instead of standing up for himself, instead of fighting back, he's just like, whatever. I'm done thinking. If it's for Shigaraki, I will do whatever it takes. And it's sad, because what Spinner's doing, I mean, Shigaraki wouldn't care. Let's be real. Shigaraki just wants to destroy it all. He doesn't care about any of this mess. So to see Spinner fall so willingly to become a tool for somebody other than his original master, who isn't even his original master because of all the lies that Spinner's wrapped up in. Ooh, it's great. It's brilliant. It's beautiful. And I love it. Oh. Man, Horikoshi, you got a pen, bro. You got a pen sometimes, my boy. Woo. However, of course, the end of the chapter leaves us with a couple important questions. One, what? Like who are all these mutants? Like, that one looks like a Nomu, I'm not even gonna lie. The other one, he just looks weird. Like, not gonna lie, a lot of these mutants look weird. But obviously, the biggest one here is Slime. And, how'd you get out that Coke bottle, bro? Let me tell me how you got out that Coke bottle. But no, in actuality, I think he would escape the Coke bottle like forever ago. But in terms of Slime being there, I mean, it's a run back for Bakugo. I hope he isn't actually what Bakugo has to wear on the 1v1 against for the entire war. Hope Bakugo doesn't get stuck like that. I hope he just gets one shot to like show Bakugo's power growth. Like, oh, he was helpless at the beginning of the series. Now with his like new special ability, he could just fauterize him. I hope that would be good to see. I would appreciate that. That'd be nice power progression. I appreciate that. However, that's not necessarily the main thing. Like, as cool as it is to have all the mutants rolling up and like we have Mutant Gang with Spinner leading them, I'm more intrigued with Toga because of how we know Twice's quirk works. So we know that for Twice to execute his quirk properly, he needs to get measurements of everybody. He needs to know intimate details about them. And while like the big ones you want to clone, like you probably want to clone some Shigarakis, not gonna lie. You probably want to clone some Dabis, not gonna lie. And probably you want to clone some Twices too. Now, notably, it's not like it's impossible, but will Toga properly know how to utilize his quirk? Because like, the thing is, Urako's is actually pretty simple to activate. You just touch somebody and then you clap your fingers together when you're done. Like, that's pretty simple. Meanwhile, Twice's quirk, it seemed like it had a much higher skill ceiling and a skill curve. That's why I feel like we see Twice's quirk backfire on him a lot later in the narrative, or like in his personal life narrative. Like, Twice was a full-grown adult before he went crazy. Like, we gotta realize that. Meanwhile, characters like Spinner, characters like Shigaraki, characters like Dabi, Toga, like all the other League of Villain members, they were pretty much childhood trauma. That's what they had, because their quirks were pretty simple and affected them drastically. Meanwhile, Twice's quirk, it seemed like it would require a lot more skill, and I'm not sure. Maybe, I know the tiny flask of blood is probably just an illusion of some sort, or like it's just supposed to represent Twice's blood, probably not actually how much he can consume. but she's gonna have to do a lot in very little time. And another thing, if she does make clones of herself, because we know that she'd probably need to, are those clones gonna have the information? Are they gonna be twice clones, or are they gonna be Toga clones? And will they run into the same problem Toga has? Will they rely on blood? Maybe not, but because she's copying. That's the thing. It's strange. Like Toga, she's a wild card, but I'm assuming what Hori is gonna do is just like have her master the quirk off screen, and she'll be able to use it just fine. But I'm intrigued to see where he goes with that, considering how much of a skill ceiling Twice's quirk seemed to have, at least, especially with all the information he needed. And obviously, this leads to interesting stuff because it just shows how swamped the heroes are going to be. And considering the fact that MHA is on break next week, I will likely probably be going over like the hypothetical upcoming war, the big matchups, the lineups. So I won't go into too much depth here. I think I'll save a lot of that for that video. But to say the very least, with all the trouble that the heroes are in right now, they're going to need a miracle and then some to win this war because they are outnumbered by a lot. However, this was a really good chapter. Like, initially, I was going to give a chapter like 7 to 8 out of 10, but that's just because of my initial reading. I wasn't the most impressed by it. But upon rereading and reviewing and reading at the same time, breaking down all the analyticals, this is definitely a 10 out of 10 chapter. A great way to start off the How We Became Heroes -1 storyline. Like, I'm very excited to see where we go from here. Oh my. I think there's a whole ton of war percent. Sorry for just coughing right in ears like that. I'm not cutting that out. But sorry for... I want to apologize again, but the thing is, I'm really, really excited to see where the series is going from this point, because, I mean, I feel like there's not much time left. Like, what do we have but war? But still super excited, 10 out of 10 chapter, but those are my thoughts. Please tell me your thoughts in the comments section down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day finding the notification bell. And also, if you have any time or money or anything to support me, please have a Patreon down below. I'd really appreciate any help you give me. Now, thank you guys so much for watching once again, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. This is That Guy with the Pencil, writing off.